the unified regularities of the electromagnetic and gravitational fields, demonstrated now on the screen, also explain why under the influence of the gravitational field the observed geometry of space-time becomes non-Euclidean. And this non-Euclideanism appears not in the most general Finsler form, but exactly in the pseudo-Riemannian, that is, bilinear form, and why Einstein's equations, in fact, do not contradict the fundamental principles of the Standard Model at all. In short, thanks to these equations, now we have a full theoretical harmony and complete absence of logical and semantic obstacles to begin the procedure of quantization of the gravitational field. Well, now let me pass to very bad news. All the theoretical luxury described above is achieved at such a cost that the vast majority of theoretical physicists would surely consider absolutely unacceptable. Such a grim forecast is based not at all on my personal pessimism, but on the simple observation of the fact that similar situations have repeatedly occurred in the history of science and led to significant delays in the progress of understanding nature. For example, heliocentrism was discovered not by Copernicus at all, but by the ancient Greek astronomer Aristarchus of Samos 1,800 years earlier. However, his idea did not gain wide support among the scientists of his time. The geocentric point of view prevailed, which was definitively formulated in the work of Claudius Ptolemy, Almagest. I must admit, this temporary victory was not entirely negative. Ptolemy's model, based on the approximation of the apparent planetary motions using complex combinations of epicycles, deferents, and equants, provided fairly accurate for those times predictions of these motions. And this circumstance served as a powerful stimulus for the development of observational astronomy, as well as for the application of complex trigonometric methods within it. However, at the same time, Ptolemy's model became a serious limiting factor in the development of theoretical physics, because theoretical physics began its actual existence only with the discovery of the precise laws of celestial mechanics, and they, in turn, could only be discovered on the basis of the heliocentric system, the dynamics of which is described not by epicycles, deferents, and equants, but by Kepler's laws. Another characteristic example is non-Euclidean geometry. It was independently discovered by three different mathematicians: Carl Friedrich Gauss, Nikolai Lobachevsky, and Janusz Bolyai. The first simply feared publishing the results of his research, due to concerns about facing scientific ostracism. The other two were not afraid and naturally faced it. Janusz Bolyai ended his days as a mentally broken man. Julius Meyer, one of the discoverers of the first law of thermodynamics, can also be confidently counted among the unjust victims of official science. His experience of dealing with representatives of the scientific establishment even led him to a psychiatric hospital for a time, following a suicide attempt. But while Julius Meyer managed to get out of there, the inventor of asepsis, Ignaz Semmelweis, simply died there from injuries inflicted by medical staff. In English, a special term has even emerged: Semmelweis reflex. It is a metaphor for the reflex-like tendency to reject new evidence or new knowledge because it contradicts established norms, beliefs, or paradigms. Of course, I am not Julius Meyer, much less Semmelweis, but I am quite familiar with the mechanism of the Semmelweis reflex, or obviousness filters, as I prefer to call this phenomenon. 10 years ago, I attempted to publish two major works of mine. The first one described the calculus of virtual numbers. The second one described the unified regularities of electromagnetism and gravity, with the derivation of Maxwell's and Einstein's equations from them. Each of these works exceeded 100 pages in length. Therefore, the path to scientific journals was closed to me. They do not publish works of that size from authors who lack academic degrees and are entirely unknown. I turned to private publishers. Naturally, no one reads them, but for a fee they are capable of a lot. For example, to publish under the guise of a scientific work, even the grimoire of John Dee, the court astrologer of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I. The first work of mine was published, though not without effort. What greatly aided this was the existence of a functional computer program that solves certain mathematical programming problems and prints listings of its calculations. And these listings include not only ordinary numbers, but also infinities and uncertainties. I demonstrated the program's operation in one of my previous videos. Admitted, my dear viewers, believing in miracles like computer calculations involving infinities and uncertainties is only possible when you see them with your own eyes. That time the publishers believed me, though naturally this publication did not bring me any fame. However, I did receive a copyright certificate and thus secured my intellectual property rights. I think the $1,000 spent was worth it. After the publication of my first work, I sent the text of the second one to the same publisher. Some time passed, and I was rejected with a rather plausible excuse. Supposedly, the publisher had suddenly run out of publishing materials. Of course, I didn't believe this and checked. Other works were still being published by the publisher. This means that the text of my work simply scared them, although works like John Dee's grimoires don't scare them at all. Recently, a similar incident occurred. The well-known scientist and remarkable science communicator Sabine Hassenfelder has a YouTube channel. It's one of my favorite channels, by the way. She released a video titled "Scientific Progress is Slowing Down, but why?" I thought to myself, why not reveal to the viewers of this video the true reason for such a regrettable phenomenon? Using my own experience of advancing scientific progress as an example. First, I briefly explained to the viewers how it's possible to reconcile general relativity with the Standard Model. After that, I was labeled a crackpot and demanded to provide mathematical proofs. The funny thing is, I've had those mathematical proofs for a long time. In fact, for a very long time. The key date of their emergence is the 24th of August 2008. But when I tried to explain where exactly one could find the relevant formulas, I simply couldn't publish my message. Clearly, an automatic spam filter on the forum was at work. Because of this filter, I was only able to post vague hints that the confirmation of my words could be found on my YouTube channel. Do you think anyone visited it after my hints? No, absolutely no one. I checked the statistics. It's also interesting that after this story, the reach of my videos dropped to 0. Thus, a very instructive picture emerged by itself. On one hand, a whole bunch of people, several thousand individuals, are trying to figure out why scientific progress is slowing down. On the other hand, at the same time, in the same place, the author of several scientific discoveries is trying to convey the essence of one of his discoveries to these several thousand people. He is labeled a crackpot and asked to provide mathematical proofs. The author is ready to present all the necessary evidence, but when he tries to do so, his messages are blocked as spam. Instead of clear evidence, he can only offer hints, which doesn't add much credibility to his arguments. Therefore, they are completely ignored, and the question persists: why is scientific progress slowing down? Well, just because, блять, that the Semmelweis reflex is triumphant, and there is no escape from it. At least, not yet. So, what made my publishers and Sabine Hassenfelder's viewers such confused? It is the fact that to achieve true quantum gravity, we will have to pay the following mind-boggling price. We will have to abandon the concept that spacetime has metric properties. In simpler terms, we will have to accept that the characteristic of length is inapplicable to the essence of space, and the characteristic of duration is inapplicable to the essence of time. Of course, this sounds like self-evident insanity, but that's the way it is. Whenever we measure the length of something, that something is always a material body, or some combination of material bodies. And the process of measuring length always boils down to aligning one material body, whose length we are measuring, with another material body, which serves as the measuring instrument or standard of length. A similar situation applies to duration. When we define the chronology of something, that something always turns out to be events occurring with material bodies, and the duration of a chronology is always determined using chronometers, that is again by means of material bodies. Every time we measure the length or duration of something, we inevitably rely on the services of matter. It is completely impossible to come up with, let alone conduct, an experiment to measure length or duration in which matter would not be involved at all. From this, it inevitably follows the undeniable truth of the thesis that metric properties belong precisely to matter, not to space-time. In simpler terms, the properties of length and duration pertain specifically to matter, not to space and time, respectively. And it is absolutely impossible to rigorously prove the opposite. Just as it is impossible to prove or disprove Euclid's fifth postulate. This result was a complete surprise, even to myself. I would never have come up with such blatant heresy if I didn't have the ability to see through the obviousness filters. So, what exactly is space? Simply a three-dimensional set of points that can be marked with spatial coordinates in one way or another. However, the lengths between these points are not inherently defined by anything. They can only be measured during material experiments, and only with the accuracy permitted by quantum laws. I hope you haven't forgotten about the uncertainty principle. Similarly, time, if we don't delve into even more mind-boggling quantum subtleties, represents a one-dimensional set of points that can be marked with temporal coordinates in one way or another. However, the duration of physical processes occurring between these points is also not inherently defined by anything. It can only be measured during material experiments and only with the accuracy permitted by quantum laws. I hope you haven't forgotten about the uncertainty principle. Oh, I'm sorry, for God's sake. I think I'm starting to repeat myself. Alright, to sum up what has been said, I just want to specifically point out that the absence of metric properties is the greatest secret of space-time. Something that no one knows about yet. Of course, except for us, my dear viewers. The revelation of the greatest secret of space-time inevitably leads to one consequence, and it is so serious that it cannot be ignored. According to general relativity, gravity is the curvature of the geometric properties of space-time. But if space-time lacks geometric properties, then what is gravity really? After all, it cannot be the curvature of something that does not exist. Could Einstein have been mistaken? Indeed, such a thing cannot be, and indeed, Einstein made a fundamental error in relation to gravity. However, we, as inheritors of Einstein's scientific treasures, have no moral right to reproach him for this, because this was truly a genius mistake, and undoubtedly the most useful error in the history of science. Without it, deriving the entirely correct mathematical framework of general relativity would have been simply impossible. Just to be absolutely clear, I want to emphasize again, absolutely impossible. Even I, with all my unified regularities, would not have been able to do it. How, for example, could I have determined that the gravitational charge is the energy momentum? Or how could I have recognized the general covariance symmetry in the mathematical properties of the right-hand side of the gravitational field equations, and then, based on this symmetry, completely reconstructed the left-hand side from its infinial? There would have been no way and no chance. To achieve that, one would have to be a truly divine mathematical visionary on the level of Srinivasa Ramanujan. And I am merely a poor self-taught craftsman when it comes to such prophetic insights. No, Einstein's mistake was truly a divine revelation sent from above, which has brought science immeasurable benefits. However, by now, the full harvest of its beneficial consequences has been gathered, and now it has become the main obstacle to the creation of quantum gravity. In reality, gravity is an entirely ordinary physical field. However, due to certain peculiarities, it does indeed possess one unusual property. It can curve not only the trajectories of bodies as they move under its influence, it also distorts their space-time configuration. Simply put, gravity, acting on any material body, bends its spatial forms and slows down the chronology of its existence. That's why any measuring instrument, no matter how precise, is itself deformed under the influence of gravity, and can no longer register any geometry other than the curved one. A similar effect can be achieved simply by deforming rulers and clocks. After all, if we start using crooked rulers and malfunctioning clocks, we do not thereby exert some magical influence on the fabric of space-time itself. We merely distort the observed geometry and chronology. There is nothing unusual or inexplicable about this. The mechanism by which gravity distorts the space-time configuration of material bodies is also extremely simple. You won't believe it, my dear viewers, but it is actually described in a classical physics textbook. It says nothing about relativity, let alone in relation to gravity. However, all the concepts necessary for a comprehensive explanation of the mechanism of gravitational distortion of material bodies are contained there. I won't make a secret out of it. It's the first volume of the Landau-Lifshitz course, paragraph 10, titled Mechanical Similarity. In reality, almost any physics student could figure this out, if they had the ability to see through the obviousness filters, of course. As for superstrings and loop quantum gravity, they are not fucking needed in this matter. As a bonus, let me reveal another terrible secret. There are no singularities inside black holes. A black hole consists entirely of the most solid material in nature, which I prefer to call gravitational ice. General relativity is not applicable for describing gravitational ice. What is needed here is quantum gravity only. In short, gravity is not the curvature of space-time. It is an ordinary physical field with one unusual feature: its ability to distort the space-time configuration of material bodies, and, as a result, to make the observed geometry appear curved. This is the greatest secret of gravity. However, this correction, or rather this complete revolution in the interpretation of gravity's physical meaning, does not in any way affect the correctness of the equations of general relativity. And this is due to a fact that is usually given little attention. The same mathematical model can allow for entirely different, sometimes even opposite, physical interpretations. A typical example is the theory of heat conduction. When Fourier first formulated its mathematical laws, many physicists sincerely believed that heat was produced by some weightless fluid. They called it caloric. However, this completely erroneous notion about the nature of heat did not prevent the mathematical framework of heat conduction theory from working correctly. Well, the curvature of space-time is just another imaginary caloric, only this time in the theory of gravity. The information presented here, like the famous Schrödinger's cat, can exist in only two states. In the first state, it is of absolutely no interest to anyone. At best, even if it is noticed by accident, it will be dismissed as just another piece of pseudoscientific shit, of which there is more than enough in the informational space of our planet. However, if even one truly influential person manages to appreciate this information appropriately, that is exactly as it deserves, then from that moment a chain reaction for its dissemination may begin, and it could become widely known in a very short time. In light of this, I have a very interesting question. Could modern network media be the initiators of such an informational outbreak? After all, if this is indeed the case, then the most favorable prospects for solving the Semmelweis reflex problem will open up for humanity. Judging by how little attention is paid to this issue in public discourse, its significance is greatly underestimated. Personally, this circumstance causes me profound sorrow, in particular because a correct understanding of quantum laws, which we have not yet achieved, opens up opportunities for inventing extremely useful technological means. For example, superluminal communication, or tools for probing the farthest corners of space. In turn, the correct interpretation of quantum phenomena will require scientists to accept such counterintuitive and mind-boggling paradigms that the lack of geometric properties in space will seem like elementary school science in comparison. How would you feel, my dear viewers, about the concept that the Almighty Lord destroys and recreates the entire universe at every moment of time? Not only does he destroy and recreate the matter of the universe, but also its entire past and future. Of course, I am joking. But you have no idea how little joke there is in this joke. I would not recommend joking with God at all, although I don't believe in his existence. After all, who knows? Today, for instance, there is definitely no God. But tomorrow, some causal artifact might appear, and we may have to rethink our views on this issue. So who would dare to promote such crazy paradigms, if humanity has an evident psychological immunity to such ideas, in the form of the Semmelweis reflex? Who would risk creating a new quantum mechanics, if it means walking on hot coals? Wouldn't it be easier to first prepare the appropriate informational and psychological ground? Unfortunately, I don't have definitive answers to these nasty questions yet. That's why I decided it would be much wiser for me not to insist on the publication of my research results at all costs. Instead, I will make these results the subject of another scientific study. I will conduct a kind of sociological experiment with them. I will not go into all the goals and meanings of it right now. It would take too much time. But I will definitely do so in another video. And for now, I will just start this experiment. More precisely, I will continue what I began in one of my previous videos. On the screen you can see the address of the Bitcoin wallet. In order to avoid faking this video, I will voice the first and last 10 characters of this address. P, C, 1, Q, H, U, 7, Q, Y, 7. V, Z, Y, 9, Y, T, 2, V, 2, V. Before sending me donations to the address given in the description, please check that it matches the address just shown and voiced. For what purpose am I going to collect cryptocurrency donations? In order to get a truly objective assessment of the interest that my information might arouse. These donations will serve as objective measurement tools, the only possible in my case, not a means of personal enrichment. Forgive me, my dear viewers, but I don't believe in the number of likes and views. The only real objective measure of interest is money. And not just money, but cryptocurrency. Only to it, national borders and other political nonsense are no barrier. If this wallet accumulates the sum of 3 bitcoins, I will fully disclose all the secrets of gravity that I have taught here. I will post a video showing the 100+ pages where the Maxwell's and Einstein's equations are derived from more general ones. This text really exists, because I tried to publish it 10 years ago. So, thanks to your donations, a complete solution to the problem of reconciling general relativity and quantum theory will become the asset of humankind. You, by the way, won't be left short either. Because Bitcoin transactions remain in the blockchain as long as the blockchain itself exists. The transaction of your donation you can always print out and hang in a frame on a wall at home. And then tell your children and grandchildren. Look, I was one of those people, thanks to whom humanity made another discovery. Isn't such an opportunity worth a small donation? I think it's worth it. So don't hesitate to donate, and don't miss the chance to make your own mark on the history of science.